Cadence Lee thought she was a normal girl, perhaps a little well-to-do, but not exceptionally so. She had her college classes, she had her job that her uncle gave her, and she had a nice boyfriend who was sweet if a little awkward. Except, when a mugger cuss Cadence and her boyfriend attempts to wrestle a gun away from the criminal, Cadence ends up shot. A normal girl, with the kind of wound Cadence had, would die. Cadence managed to do that part. But a normal girl wouldn't then open her eyes again and learn that death is not as permanent for her as it is for other people. She can be reborn again, and again. Each time stronger and with new abilities. The catch? Any world she is born into, she can never return to. She has infinite lives, but only one life for each. So begins the many lives of Cadence Lee. Chapter 1. To be fair, I always knew he was an idiot. Well, it would be more accurate to say that I knew he was the kind of guy who was an idiot around girls. Honestly, I found it kind of sweet in an awkward sort of way, which is part of the reason I have ended up here. Lying on the concrete looking up at the night sky, light pollution having washed away the stars, and rather dispassionately noticing that I was feeling cold as my blood pooled under me. My boyfriend, we had definitely been dating long enough for me to call him that, was holding a scruffy-looking man at gunpoint while talking into his phone. Well, that makes it sound like my boyfriend shot me or something, but I think I can be excused if I am not able to properly communicate at the moment. I can't even speak right now, and my thoughts are wandering and hard to focus. It had been a nice night. A movie date was a bit of a cliché, but one you have to put up with if you date a guy who honestly owns and watched the Christmas special. Obviously, he was going to go see the new movies, that was just a given. Actually, having a mugger accuse us on our way back to his car was a cliché as well. I was surprised that my boyfriend actually had the guts to attack a man with a gun. I suppose that he was the kind of guy who really wanted to live up to the clichés. Reality, however, is never so kind. As my boyfriend tackled the man and wrestled him for the gun and I went for my phone, all it took was an accidental. At least, I would like to think so. I doubt even most muggers want to be killers. Shot, and here I was. I could hear the sirens now. My boyfriend's face entered my view of the sky and I could see his mouth moving, but I couldn't understand the words. He looked so worried, I really felt bad about it. Maybe I could force myself to speak a few words. Daniel, if you blame yourself for this, I will fucking come back to haunt you. Not the most elegant of last words, but it wasn't like I was going to be around to regret it. The world was already fading away. Asterisk. I hadn't expected to wake up, but I found myself looking up at a white ceiling. It still felt like I was on concrete. Well, not actually, whatever I was on was as hard as concrete, but it was smooth where concrete was rough. These thoughts went through my head as I got up on instinct and looked around to see a bare white room that was very definitely not a hospital room. Before I even had a moment to catch my bearings, a screen-like box appeared in front of me, causing me to jump in fright. Welcome Cadence Lee, and congratulations on completing your first life. So this was the afterlife? Admittedly, as an atheist, I had not expected an afterlife at all. But an empty room would make for a pretty crappy eternity. Perhaps, I had gone to hell and this is my punishment. Or, more likely, this was a final fever dream as my brain was deprived of oxygen. I would have thought my dying brain would have come up with something more fantastic, but on the other hand, it was dying. I should cut it some slack, at least it had come up with more text for me to read. Congratulations, you have been chosen to become an incarnator. Please, step up to the podium and have your life be measured. Well, the room had been empty. I suppose I can only blame my possibly dying mind for the inconsistency in my hallucinations. Now there was a black marble podium near the far wall. I swung my legs down and got down from the marble slab I had been lying on. Getting up and looking around, yeah, a boring white room and a black podium. I wasn't really comfortable being naked. But at least I could look down and see my skin was smooth and not punctured by a bullet. Approaching the podium, I see that there is a handprint outlined in silver on the top. Taking the cue, I put my hand on top and the room brightened as more screens began to pop up. Calculating your life accomplishments. You survived 19 years. For surviving 19 years you have earned 19 points. You took part in being professionally educated in new subjects. For going through 13 years of professional education, you have earned 6 points. You learned multiple languages. For becoming fluent in 2 languages and conversant in 1, you have earned 3 points. You were socially active. For having a combined total of friends and acquaintances between 100 and 200 people, you have earned 1 point. Your point total is 26 points. Your grade for this life is F. For obtaining a grade of F, you gain no bonuses. For obtaining a grade of F, you have received a strike. If you obtain 3 strikes, you will no longer be reincarnated. You have beginner's protection. 1 strike removed. Your beginner's protection will last 3 more lives. Well, fuck you too. I think my life was fine while I had it, and in fairness it was cut a little short. I would have thought my self-esteem was good enough for me not to hallucinate my own failure, but I also can't really imagine that something like this would actually be the afterlife. Well, I suppose it is just as likely as any other afterlife I have heard about. Congratulations, Incarnator. You have earned multiple achievements. For dying for the first time, you have earned the achievement First Run and earned 5 points. You have unlocked the Incarnator menu. For dying a violent death for the first time, you have earned the achievement Bloody Restart and earned 2 points. You have unlocked the Defense tab in the store. For dying a violent death despite an earnest attempt to save your life by a loved one for the first time, you have earned the achievement Sacrifice in Vain and earned 5 points. You have unlocked the Relationship tab in the store. That is honestly unsettling. We had never said that we loved each other. We were friends before we dated, but I had no idea his feelings were that strong. My own feelings for him? I can't say if I loved him, but even if it killed me, he had risked his life for mine. That is at least worth considering it, but I don't think I can do that right now. For learning basic math for the first time, you have earned the achievement It Adds Up and earned 1 point. You have unlocked the Intelligence tab in the store. For learning algebra for the first time, you have earned the achievement Letters Can Be Numbers 2 and earned 2 points. For learning geometry for the first time, you have earned the achievement The World is Made of Shapes and earned 2 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning trigonometry for the first time, you have earned the achievement How Far Away Is That and earned 2 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning calculus for the first time, you have earned the achievement Area of a Curve and earned 3 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning a great deal of math, you have earned the achievement Polymath and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning a language for the first time, you have earned the achievement Speak Up and earned 1 point. You have unlocked the Communications tab. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning more than 2 languages, you have earned the achievement Polyglot and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence and Communication tabs. For becoming professionally educated in the art of writing itself for the first time, you have earned the achievement Literacy and earned 2 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For writing more than 30 essays for the first time, you have earned the achievement Minor Essayist and earned 1 point. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For writing more than 20 poems for the first time, you have earned the achievement Minor Poet and earned 1 point. You have unlocked the Arts tab. For reading a book for the first time, you have earned the achievement First Book and earned 1 point. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. Holy fuck, this is a long list. Are any of these things even worth mentioning? Honestly, I barely passed calculus. Saying I learned it might be a bit of an exaggeration, because without my notes or a search engine I might as well give up. I suppose since this is my first life, I would get a lot of first-time achievements? Makes sense, I guess, as much as this probable hallucination can anyway. For reading 10 books for the first time, You have earned the achievement Minor Reader and earned 2 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence and Arts tabs. For reading 50 books for the first time, you have earned the Achievement Reader and earned 3 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence and Arts tab. For reading 100 books for the first time, you have earned the Achievement Great Reader and earned 5 points. For reading 200 books for the first time, you have earned the Achievement Avid Reader and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence and Arts tabs. For reading 500 books for the first time, you have earned the Achievement Bookworm and earned 10 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence and Arts tabs. Jesus, I get it. I read a lot of books. For owning at least 50 books for the first time, you have earned the Achievement Minor Librarian and earned 4 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence and Arts tabs. I owned a lot more than that. Do they not count because they are e-books? What is with the discrimination? For learning the basics of biology for the first time, you have earned the achievement Look It's Alive and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning advanced concepts in biology for the first time, you have earned the achievement That Is Alive Too and earned 10 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning the basics of physics for the first time, you have earned the achievement Force and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning advanced concepts in physics for the first time, you have earned the achievement Applied Force and earned 10 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning about the basics of health science for the first time, you have earned the achievement How to Keep Breathing and earned 5 points. You have unlocked the Vitals tab. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning about the basics of chemistry for the first time, you have earned the achievement Acid Burns and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning about the basics of environmental sciences for the first time, you have earned the achievement Minor Environmentalist and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning about the basics of economic science for the first time, you have earned the achievement Small Money and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For learning about the basics of governance for the first time, you have earned the achievement Politics and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence and Communications tabs. For qualifying for and participating in a large athletic tournament for the first time, you have earned the achievement Athlete and earned 2 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Vitals tab. I suppose that last one was for track and field. We only made it to the state level though. I wouldn't exactly call it large. How is? Who or whatever is in charge of this deciding what is what? What counts as the basics of biology versus advanced biological concepts? I only took a single biology class and it wasn't even advanced placement. Who is this system comparing my life to? For having an income in the top 50% of your planet, you have earned the achievement Earner Global and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For having an income in the top 75% of your planet, you have earned the achievement Big Earner Global and earned 10 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For having an income in the top 10% of your planet, you have earned the achievement Massive Earner Global and earned 15 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. For having an income in the top 5% of your planet, you have earned the achievement Elite Earner Global and earned 25 points. You have unlocked additional options in the Intelligence tab. Oh. Wow, that is sad. I mean, sure, I went to work for my uncle's company, which is how I had a job that gave me a yearly income a few thousand below 30 grand when I was still in college, but it is depressing that 95% of the world's population makes less than I do. With all the protests against the top 1%, I suppose it is easy to forget that I was very fortunate to be born where I was. When you start looking at it globally, I lived in nearly extravagant wealth. But I had only thought of myself as being a few years ahead of my classmates because of family connections. Thanks brain and or godlike entity controlling this hallucination or place, getting shot hadn't ruined my night enough, reminding me of the depressing sinkhole that is income inequality really helped me finish grinding away any last vestige of happiness. For having more than 50 friends and acquaintances for the first time, you have earned the achievement lesser conversationalist and earned 2 points. You have unlocked additional options in the communications tab. For having more than 100 friends and acquaintances for the first time, you have earned the achievement conversationalist and earned 5 points. You have unlocked additional options in the communications tab. For having a romantic relationship for the first time, you have earned the achievement first romance and earned 1 point. You have unlocked additional options in the communications tab. For performing oral sex for the first time, you have earned the achievement tongue magic and earned 1 point. You have unlocked additional options in the communications tab. That doesn't dash well fuck you, you fucking peeping podium. I am a goddamn adult and you aren't my dad, and I wouldn't have listened to him give me crap about this either. The relationship wasn't exactly love, from my side yet, at least, but it was going well enough and I didn't feel bad about making that decision. For dying as a virgin in a romantic relationship after performing a sexual act, you have earned the achievement returned unopened and earned 1 point. You have unlocked additional options in the communications tab. I am going to break this fucking podium to pieces. For having many devices and machines that do not use magic, you have earned the achievement technophile and earned 3 points. You have unlocked additional options in the communications tab. For dying, without ever using magic or interacting with mana, for the first time, you have earned the achievement manoless and earned 5 points. You have unlocked the magic tab. Calculating achievement total. Your points earned from achievements is 197 points. Recalculating your life accomplishments. Your point total is 223 points. Your grade for this life is D. For obtaining a grade of D, you have earned a bonus 50 points. Would you like to access the Incarnator menu now? I don't know what the fuck is going on. Sure, you bastard magic podium, show me this Incarnator menu. Chapter 2 What is the difference between a hallucination and a delusion? Since this perverted peeping podium, alliteration took my clothes, I couldn't exactly look it up. Still, I could only imagine that being able to feel my hand on the oddly warm, black marble-like podium, as well as the cool, white marble-like floor beneath my bare feet was not a good sign of my mental health. It didn't help that I was staring at a floating box that was labeling itself as the Incarnator menu, after having a friggin' podium judge my entire life. It also didn't help that the longer I was here, the more I was starting to worry that this actually was the afterlife. It just felt so real. But I don't want to think about that now, so I guess I will take a look at this menu. Incarnator menu, points balance, 273 points. Stats, strength, 0 plus endurance, 0 plus vitality, 0 plus agility, 0 plus dexterity, 0 plus perception, 0 plus acuity, 0 plus willpower, 0 plus charisma, 0 plus magic, 0 plus luck, 0 plus ability menu, arts, communications, defense, general, intelligence, magic, relationships, vitals, records, life records, ability list, achievement list. Well, I let my breath out, noting that I can feel the air in my lungs and throat, but that the room seemed to be sealed entirely. I can guess what the stats mean, but I would rather not. A little help, Pody. Another screen appeared after I asked, which made me feel a little better about having just given a podium, of all things, a name. If it worked right? I took a look at the floating box, muttering under my breath as I read it. The silence in this room was getting to me. Strength means amount of physical strength, isn't that a tautology? I don't mind though, it was obvious enough to merit it. Endurance affects how long you can perform physical actions or resist the environment. Again, pretty obvious I suppose. Seems like it would overlap with vitals though, as that improved health and lifespan. Agility improved speed and reaction time. Dexterity improved fine motor control, which seemed like it wasn't really important compared to the others. Perception improved your senses. Acuity improved how fast you thought, and willpower improved, well, willpower. The next three stats were a bit more complex than the ones before. Charisma affects interpersonal relations and physical beauty. How would that even work? Beauty is subjective, so how would someone become objectively more beautiful? I wondered aloud, rather hoping that Poti would give me an answer of some kind. No such luck though, so I just shrugged and moved on. Magic improves your affinity with magic of all kinds, as well as your mana pool and mana regeneration rate. Sounds like that would be great, if magic existed. I am still waiting on my Hogwarts letter, Poti, and every year that passed I lost a little more hope. If you can get me a wand, an owl, and a way into Ravenclaw, I might even forgive you for the peeping. Maybe. The final stat, luck, supposedly improved the myriad paths of destiny, whatever the fuck that meant. After that, there was a brief note that stats purchased in the Incarnator menu were added to your total stats at birth and that the average human had a score of 100 in each category. Although that could apparently vary wildly depending on genetics and other factors. The last line told me that I could purchase one stat point for 10 Incarnator points. Alright, thanks for the information, I said, and the help screen disappeared, making me slightly more suspicious that Poti was actually intelligent and listening to me. Of course, I immediately dismissed that thought because I don't want to think this could be real. Let me take a look at that ability menu then. I might as well go through it as it is listed and start with arts. There were not many options, but considering I didn't remember seeing many additional options unlocked for arts, I had not really expected all that many either. It was a quick read. Arts Abilities tab. Rhymer. This ability makes it far easier to find rhymes in any language. 25 points. Relaxing read. When reading a book for entertainment, your stress falls away. 25 points. Fanciful speech. When attempting to speak artfully, you will find it much easier to do. 30 points. Stories are life. When reading a book for entertainment you require 25% less food and water, as well as become tired 25% slower. Asterisk warning. This ability can only be used for entertainment purposes. Reading an entertainment book for the purpose of reducing consumption or sleep will result in this skill failing to activate. Asterisk 100 points. Heroic reading. Reading an inspiring story improves one stat by up to 10% and for as much as 5 days. The amount of stat growth and the duration of the buff depend on the quality and length of the story. 250 points. Never stop reading. Vastly improves your ability to multitask while reading. Allows you to have multiple parallel thoughts, so long as one of those is devoted to reading an entertainment-related book. 500 points. Arts Librarian 1. Allows you to create a copy of any entertainment or arts book you can see. Costs mana to use. Mana cost is dependent on distance, book length, and material. 500 points. A few of those sounded interesting, but they also seemed really limited. The most interesting ones were worth more than the entire value of my life apparently. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. On one hand, I would have said that human life was priceless. On the other hand, I might have considered performing human sacrifice for the ability to read and navigate my life at the same time. Not anyone who was good, of course, but I wouldn't have minded tossing the mugger upon Poti to use as an altar. It obviously doesn't work like that though. Oh well, next tab. Communications Abilities tab. First kiss. Your first kiss in each life is improved. 10 points. Better first impression. If you were going to give a good first impression upon meeting someone for the first time, your impression will be even better than before. 25 points. Name to a face. If you know a person's name, you are able to recall their name if you look at their face. 50 points. Chastity is a virtue. You gain the ability to consciously control your level of arousal. 50 points. First words. When you are born into a world, you learn to understand your first language in that world much faster. 50 points. Second words. When learning a new language past your first, you learn the language more quickly. 100 points. Sexual prowess, oral, improves your ability to perform oral sex. 100 points. Bureaucracy navigation. When interacting with government bureaucracy, your words and submissions will often be given a higher priority than normal. 200 points. So, what, like I'd get my tax return back faster? I raised an eyebrow skeptically, and then had an unpleasant thought. Or if I called the police, would they prioritize my call over people who might actually have more important issues? That seems dangerous, although considering I called the police because I was shot to death. I also tried to avoid wondering what the first words option meant by born into a new world. I would really prefer this to be a hallucination or delusion potty, and I completely ignored the romance parts. Shouldn't they be in the relationship tab anyway? Technology intuition. You have an instinctive understanding of how to operate simple to moderately complex technology. 250 points. And what does that even mean? I complain out loud. What counts as simple or moderate technology? Are we talking a lever, a car, a phone, or a friggin' space shuttle? Next up is the Defense tab, which is thankfully short. Defense Abilities tab. Danger sense. Have a chance to instinctively know if you are in danger or if an action will cause you to be in danger. This chance is greatly affected by your perception, acuity, and luck. 500 points. Only one option, and an expensive one at that. It looks like it would be useful for someone else. Admittedly, it would have helped a little bit ago, however overall my life has been danger-free. I would like to keep it that way too. Let's open the General tab then, although I don't remember unlocking it. I suppose I didn't have to? General Abilities tab. Incarnator construction. When in the incarnation chamber, you gain the ability to manipulate the space and create any kind of structure you can imagine. 1000 points. Incarnator furniture. When in the incarnation chamber, you gain the ability to create any furniture you can imagine. 1000 points. Incarnator clothes. When in the incarnation chamber, you gain the ability to create any clothes you can imagine. 1000 points. So my life isn't even worth a set of clothes. If this is a hallucination or delusion of some kind, I am going to go find a psychiatrist when I wake up, because I must obviously have some serious issues. The other abilities seem nice too. Having a chair to sit on instead of having to stand here with my hand on the podium would be good. So would having something other than an empty white room to look at. Anyway, time to bite the bullet. I guess I have to be careful about saying that anymore, and read through the Intelligence tab. This is going to be a long one. Intelligence Abilities tab. Steady writing. Your writing is always legible. 10 points. Steady reading. You find it much easier to read otherwise illegible writing. 10 points. Wealth counter. In a world with a system, your menu has an extra option displaying how much money you have on you. This skill is not effective in worlds without a system. 10 points. Mind analysis. Life. When using an analyze type skill on a living target, you gain extra information. This skill's effectiveness increases with perception and acuity. 25 points. Mind analysis. Chemical. When using an analyze type skill on a physical target, you gain extra information about its chemical composition. This skill's effectiveness increases with perception and acuity. 25 points. Fast thought. Simple math. When performing simple math, your acuity is doubled. 25 points. Speak easy. When speaking a language, you always instinctively know correct grammar and pronunciation. 25 points. Read easy. When reading language with unclear grammar, you instinctively know what the author meant. 25 points. Healthy thoughts. Basic health practices are more effective. 25 points. Safe library. Minor. Any book you own is 10% harder to damage. 25 points. Knowledge is life. When reading a book for an educational purpose, you require 25% less food and water, as well as become tired 25% slower. Asterisk warning. This ability can only be used for educational purposes. Reading an educational book for the purpose of reducing consumption or sleep will result in this skill failing to activate. Asterisk 100 points. Fast thought. Algebra. When performing algebra, your acuity is doubled. 100 points. Money is life. When working on finances, you require up to 10% less food and water, as well as become tired 10% slower. This effectiveness of the skill is dependent on the complexity of the finances involved, as well as your vitality and acuity stats. Asterisk warning. This ability can only be used when working with finances. Performing financial work for the purpose of reducing consumption or sleep will result in this skill failing to activate. Asterisk 100 points. Fast thought. Geometry. When performing geometry, your acuity is doubled. 200 points. Practical physics. You gain a minor bonus to all actions. Bonuses decrease as the complexity and danger of the action increases, but increase with your perception and acuity. 200 points. Fast thought. Reading. When reading, your acuity is doubled. 200 points. Fast thought. Trigonometry. When performing trigonometry, your acuity is doubled. 200 points. One language to another. When you are trying to learn a new language, it is much easier to learn if it is related to a language you already know. 250 points. Fast thought. Calculus. When performing calculus, your acuity is doubled. 300 points. Road to self-improvement. Reading a new book has a chance to randomly increase a stat by 1. Asterisk warning. Point totals reset on death and do not carry over to new lives. Asterisk 500 points. Fast thought. Finances. When performing work on finances, your acuity is increased up to double. Bonus is dependent on your understanding of the finances, as well as your luck stat. 500 points. Fast thought. Physics. When performing work in physics, your acuity is increased up to double. Bonus is dependent on your understanding of the physics involved. 500 points. Great luck. Wealth. After you are born you gain a bonus to your luck that is applied when you are dealing with money. This bonus can be up to double your luck. 750 points. Perfect memory. Math. You are able to remember all mathematical knowledge you have ever learned. 1000 points. Fast thought. Governance. When performing work in government, your acuity is increased up to double. Bonus is dependent on your understanding of all involved factors and the complexity of those factors. 2500 points. Money for blood. You gain the ability to spend your money to recover your health. The amount of health you regain is dependent on the value of the currency spent. Currency spent in this manner is destroyed. 2500 points. Wow Pody, that is a long list of things I can't afford. I comment and let out a low whistle. I'll admit that fast thought, governance doesn't make me mad about how little my life is worth at least. Knowing that it would cost my life 3 times over to not mix up sine and cosine is kind of depressing. I sigh, and then tell Pody just to hit me with all the rest of the list at once. I want to get this done, whatever it is. However, I perked up when I saw the next list to open, and then immediately became disappointed. If there isn't any magic, why would mana regeneration matter anyway? Magic Abilities tab. Mana Sync. Your mana regeneration is massively increased. This skill's effectiveness is dependent on your vitality, acuity, willpower, magic, and luck stats, as well as your current health and on the amount of mana in the environment and the percent of your total mana you have. The more mana in the environment, and the less mana you currently have, the greater the skill's effect. 5000 points. Relationships Abilities tab. Gratitude and Death. This skill massively and permanently increases the stats of a loved one who attempted to save your life if you die regardless. Stat improvement is dependent on your relationship, charisma, and luck stats. This skill also allows you to send a short message to the target of the skill from the Incarnator menu after death. 100,000 points. Vitals Abilities tab. Improved training. The lower your physical stats are, the easier they are for you to raise. 100 points. I closed the Relationships tab quickly. I didn't want to look at it. If this is some kind of fantasy brought about by my injured mind, then there is no reason for me to worry by reading it. If this is, God forbid, real, then the cost of being able to send a message back isn't something I want to look at. So I can't get clothes, I can't afford most abilities, and the abilities I can purchase aren't very interesting, I sigh. I'm not very impressed, Pody. A small part of me almost hopes this isn't all a dream, because I would hope my brain could do better than this. Honestly, the longer I was here, the more nervous I was feeling. I was shifting my weight from foot to foot, agitation running through me just under the surface. I had been hoping that I would just wake up partway through some of this, and I obviously hadn't. So, how do I get out of here anyway? I ask and a new screen appears. Would you like to reincarnate? You will be unable to spend incarnator points while in a world. Yes/no. I hesitate. Despite how uncomfortable I am starting to feel, I had a worse feeling about that option. I didn't want to make it yet, so I chose no and went back to looking at my options. Should I just treat this like the novels my boyfriend likes? Well, I like them too, but it is easier just to pin the blame on him, and it is funny to see his face when I do. Okay, Pody, give me first words, better first impression, and then split the rest of the points evenly between vitality, acuity, and charisma. There is an extra point left over, right? Add that one to charisma. There wasn't any fanfare, my incarnator points just dropped to 8, and my vitality and acuity went up to 6, while my charisma went up to 7. I hadn't managed to put my choice off for long. This isn't real. My thoughts were blurring worse than they were when I was shot. This isn't real. This isn't real. It isn't real. Pody. Reincarnate me now. Beginning reincarnation. You currently are only allowed to reincarnate into worlds with a system. World found. May your life be glorious, incarnator. The world went black. For a moment, for an eternity, I felt nothing. Then I felt warmth, pressure, and suddenly there was bright light that blinded me and I was pulled into a woman's hands. I tried to blink and rub my eyes, but my body would barely respond. I heard a voice, a worried woman. My eyes clear enough that I can see the woman, and clear enough that I can look down on myself. The worried voices continue, but I can't understand the language. I am a baby, a newborn. Oh God, this is real. Grief overwhelms me and I can't help but scream as I begin to cry. The midwife smiles and the worried voices are filled with relief as I am handed to a new woman who is laying in a bed. After all, a silent baby is a terrible sign, and the wailing they hear is a sign of healthy lungs. My new mother rocks me in her arms as I cry. She doesn't know I am grieving being unable to say goodbye to another mother, and a father, and an uncle, and a boy who loved me enough to risk his life for mine. My new body is exhausted, my eyes, blurry with tears, are heavy. My new mother is singing a soft lullaby in an unknown language and rocking me slowly. I don't want to be awake, I let sleep take me. Chapter 3. I think I would have let myself die in my first few months if it wasn't for my new mother. I didn't scream and cry past that first day. I had never known that it was possible to have so much grief that I didn't even have the energy to form tears. So much grief that I couldn't feel hunger. So much grief that I was hardly even aware of where I was. Just gray, cloying, sadness consuming everything. But I couldn't do that to Mother. Whatever happened to me, it wasn't her fault. If I just let myself sink into that gray mass and slept until I passed away, I would hurt her, not beyond what I can imagine, not anymore, but now that I don't have to imagine it is even worse, so much. For those first 3 months, Mother worried constantly that there was something wrong with me because I didn't respond like a baby should. The desperate love of a worried mother for her child is a powerful thing. So she nursed me, I ate, and eventually I was able to contain my grief enough. It hadn't gone away, but Mother deserved better than this. I smiled and laughed and played when she watched me, but silence found me quickly when I was alone. Which wasn't very often because I was a baby after all. Today, Father was playing with me as Mother prepared dinner. If you can call him, repeatedly poking my cheek as I try to stop him. Does my annoyance amuse you, Father? I actually know it does, because I can sort of understand the language. Just a few words so far, but enough to know that he finds my pout adorable. Maybe it is, I wouldn't know. We don't have a mirror in the house. Apartment? Tenement, that is a good word for our home. I wasn't paying attention for the first bit of my new life, but now that I look around it becomes obvious that this world is at a medieval level of technology. Our home was a set of rooms in a wood and stone building. Thought's windows had wood shutters instead of glass. It was a small place, without even a kitchen. Mother was cooking with a heavy pot over a hearth in the main room. We had two other, smaller, rooms. The larger of the two belonged to my parents, the smaller of the two belonged to my older brother and will eventually be mine too. And no, I wasn't looking forward to sharing my bedroom with a brother 6 years my elder. It was pretty dark, I had never seen my parents use anything like candles, and the ceiling dripped in a spot near the common room's window. The common room was small itself, you could toss it in one of the bedrooms into my former apartment in my previous world. I miss you all so much. It hurts. But there wasn't any reason to think about that or compare. No, the important part was that Mother was magic. Despite it being like medieval Europe, our home was immaculately clean. I could watch Mother clean for hours, but she seemed to barely spend 5 minutes doing it. Even if Father comes home with mud on his boots, she spent more time scolding him than she did cleaning it up. Mother was a maid for one of the local nobles. No, that isn't correct, it turns out that she was a maid. It had just been a few days ago that I had discovered that the world I was born into had a system, exactly like Pody said it would. By thinking of opening up a menu, it would happen. And luckily, the menu seemed invisible to everyone else besides me. Which neatly explained why sometimes my parents would seem to stare into space at nothing at times and allowed me something to investigate and look at it while I was being a good baby. Character menu. Name, Honora, daughter of Velvet. Age, 0. Class, level. Statistics, strength, 4. Endurance, 4. Vitality, 10. Agility, 6. Dexterity, 2. Perception, 5. Acuity, 14. Willpower, 3. Charisma, 17. Magic, 5. Luck, 87. Abilities. First words, Incarnator skill, hidden, better first impression, Incarnator skill, hidden. Honora was, of course, me. And Elvid was my father's name. We didn't have a family name, I was just Honora, daughter of Elvid. I was honestly fine with that, despite the fact he was still poking my cheek. I had initially been worried about my incredibly low stats, but I had seen my strength tick up just recently. It seemed that my stats were low because I was a child, except for my luck. My luck seems high compared to my other stats, but Pody told me the average for every stat was 100 and I have yet to see it go up. I am probably stuck with a luck of 87 for the rest of my life. This one anyways. Ignoring luck, my highest stat is charisma, one of the stats that I added points to. I give up trying to use my pudgy hands to stop Father from poking me and try to bite him instead. Although, since I have forgotten that I don't have teeth right now, it was not as effective as I would have hoped. I don't know anything about baby development. Would asking Mother for help be freakishly too early now? It is hard to form words with my mouth. He poked me again. Mama. I start crying. Mother, rescue me from Father, please. Of course, my first word blew up the room, and Mother rushed over while Father stopped poking me for a second out of surprise. Unfortunately, my gamble backfired as Father went from poking to messing up my hair. And it had just started growing in again. Asterisk. Being a baby got old fast and I might have rushed things a little. By the time I was a year old, I had mostly figured out the language. Trying not to talk was simply too hard, although I somewhat suspect that this feeling was influenced by my immature body. But that had been 2 years ago. I am 3 now and home alone. Well, my brother is here, but Calvin is only 9. Really, I should be looking after him. Case in point. Come on, Honora, It will be fine, you don't mind going outside with Mom or Dad. Calvin was a copy of Father. Both of them had dark blonde hair, both of them had sharp faces with hazel eyes, and they both were as skinny as a rake. Mother looked much softer than that Father did, although she was amazingly fit, especially considering her children. Her eyes were a pleasant blue, green, and her hair a rich brown. I can only hope I look as good as does when I grow up. Anyway, like any good 2 or 3 year old child would, I responded to my dear brother with eloquence and poise. No. We are just heading out to the street. My friends are waiting for me. Calvin pleaded with me. We are basically home, Mom and Dad won't care. Mother was a maid working for a local noble and Father was a servant for the same noble family. Mother had time off when I was born and for long enough afterwards that I was eating real food instead of breast milk. I would say I am happy to be eating real food now, but I don't think the mashed mush that I get to eat so I don't choke to death counts. My mother had a little lighter work for a while after that, but by a year and a half after I was born, she was back at work full-time. This meant that Calvin became my new babysitter, and as you would expect, he wasn't exactly happy about it. He didn't actually have to spend all day, every day with me, but because he had to keep checking up on me often he wasn't able to go off with his friends. No, I don't want to. I refused. I really didn't like leaving home without Mother and Father. How could I feel safe in some weird medieval world like this? The only reason my brother and I were clean was because our parents had skills related to cleaning. Ugh, they are gonna start on Nora. Calvin stopped and looked at me, and I all of a sudden had a bad feeling. You know what? I'll just carry you out. Well, no amount of no was going to help me now. Calvin was more than twice my size, so I soon found myself outside blinking in the bright sunlight. Our home was so dark, going outside always blinded me at first. Not that there was much to look at. Verdun was, I am told, a larger city. An amazing city. The Duke of our province had his seat here, and while we lived with the commoners, we lived in some of the better parts of the city because Mother and Father worked for the nobility and had to be close enough to get to work. And to modern eyes, it was a pit. Most of the roads weren't paved. It had rained last night, and the movement of people, animals, and carts had churned the road into a muddy mess. The buildings were stone and wood with stains from the smoke from cooking hearths. Chimneys weren't really a thing here. On the other hand, I was surprised by how tall the buildings were. The tenements were 4 or 5 stories tall, with the best rooms being closer to the road, and thus closer to the well. A sign of how well-to-do our family was that Calvin only had to carry me down from the 2nd floor. "Calvin! You're here!" came a shout from someone among the group of boys that made up my brother's friends. "Did you have to bring your sister with you? Dad'll tan me if I leave her alone again, Emil." Calvin winced at the memory. Like any good 3-year-old and younger sister, I of course helped him move on from the memory of getting spanked by correcting his grammar. "You mean Father will?" Did I sound smug? Probably. I felt smug even though I was picking on a kid. I am a kid too, after all. "You need to speak properly, brother." Emil, a lunky and dirty boy with messy brown hair and rumpled clothes, just laughed as my brother groaned. "Well, forgive him today, Honora." Emil smiled as he spoke, because today is a big one. My older bro is going to be coming back from his awakening ceremony soon. Well, that explains why my brother was so determined to be down here. The awakening ceremony every person goes through at 10 years old allows them to choose a class for the first time. Moreover, Emil's older brother, Mir, not the most inventive naming from their parents, was the oldest boy in my brother's friend group, and so Calvin looked up to him a lot. "Well, I won't tell Father this time," I cross my arms, although I doubt I look very distinguished considering my brother is still holding me and my feet are dangling off the ground. But just this once. Wow, I done single quote NTC her all that often, but your sis really talks well, huh? Ian, another friend of my brother, seemed surprised. I suppose my family was used to me, and I was still young enough that I haven't really interacted with others all that much. I probably stand out a bit. "Eh, Whatever, it isn't like I am hiding. It is because I am a magical being from another world, I said casually as my brother set me down. I am older than all of you and have experienced wonders you cannot even imagine. My brother just rolls his eyes and says, Mom and Dad work for nobles, and they want us to as well, so they make us speak properly, I correct him as I gingerly pick my way across the mud to the area right by our tenement door. The stones that make up the foundation also provide a place to sit down that is mostly dry. Now I just need to find a way to get the mud off my feet. Ha ha, I wonder what her acuity is. Maybe when she goes through her awakening she will get image class or something. Another one of his friends laughed. It was a fair-sized group of boys, all between 7 and 9 years old. Well, 7 and 10 now with Mir, although he might leave to start working now. They don't exactly have child labor laws here. We didn't have to wait long. Mir, along with his parents, all dressed in their best clothes, came up the road. Emil probably hadn't gone with them to the church because they didn't have another pair of shoes. They all had wide smiles though, and the boys immediately swarmed them. Well, come on. Tell us. Emil was practically vibrating with excitement as he ran up to his brother. Most parents try to convince their kids to choose the same class that they had, but Emil and his family belonged to a group that believed that the child should choose for themselves. Which meant that the only one who could know what class Mir would get, was Mir. Of course, peasants didn't exactly have a lot of options usually. It wasn't like Mir was going to qualify for Dragon Knight or something and suddenly call a dragon down from the sky. Still, the occasional odd option popped up, apparently. You're looking at the newest member of Verdun's militia, Mir thumped his chest and announced proudly. I'm starting my training tomorrow as a new militiaman. The boys oohed and awed. It seems boys in every generation are enamored with the idea of becoming a soldier, although chances are Mir would evolve his class into guardsman instead of soldier. Either of them could be dangerous jobs, but they had decent pay and guardsmen were rarely hassled by other guards. Considering it was an uncommon class for a peasant to unlock, there were certainly reasons for the smiles. I moved my legs to avoid being the way of a man working nearby, seemingly trying to stay out of the muddy center of the street, and returned to watching the group. Suddenly, I was in the air. The man had grabbed me. Calvin. I screamed as I tried to struggle, but I couldn't even fight my brother off. The adult was able to hold me in one arm and cover my mouth with his other hand. Honora. My brother whipped around and I caught a glimpse of his wide-eyed face before I was only able to see a blur of movement. Stop. Kidnapper. I think they ran after me, but this man is fast. And somewhat hard to look at. You would think people would notice a man running with a struggling child through a busy city, but no one did. A few minutes later, I was tossed into a carriage with my brother left far behind. I had just been snatched right off the street. Chapter 4 I had my head knocked against the carriage floor when I was tossed in, so I was a bit out of it when my kidnapper entered in after me and the carriage started moving. Thankfully, I wasn't knocked out, but my head wasn't exactly clear at first. Which was why I didn't notice that there was another man in the car, even with my kidnapper talking to him. I thought you were going to grab the boy. Does it matter? She was outside and far easier to grab. My kidnapper replied as he sat down, either way they will have to do what we want or get her back in pieces. Who are you people? I managed to croak out as I scrambled to sit up. There were 2 men in dark cloaks, and I honestly couldn't tell you more than that. They were hard to look at, and even though I was at an angle that allowed me to look under their hoods, the area under them was unnaturally dark. Just a couple of rogues, little miss, my kidnapper answered me. If you swear to be a good girl and not scream or cry or try to run, I might not even have to have you beaten and gagged, understand? The girl is 3 years old, of course she doesn't understand. The other rogue laughed. No sir, I understand, I quickly spoke up, obviously not wanting to be gagged and beaten. If you can promise not to harm me, or my family, I won't cause you any trouble. Been a long time since someone called me sir. The rogue sounded amused. She is very polite, isn't she? Her parents are probably teaching her to serve house failures when she gets her class. Bit of a waste now, isn't it? My kidnapper answered. I think he was looking at me, but because I couldn't see his eyes I wasn't sure. The rest of the ride was in silence, and I didn't dare risk their anger by getting up onto a seat, so I just sat on the floor of the carriage the whole time. Riding in a carriage was rougher and shakier than I would have imagined, but maybe that was just my perception considering the situation. I wasn't sure how long the ride was, maybe 30 minutes, but it might have been longer, but it eventually stopped and I was brought out of the carriage and into a warehouse of some kind. It looked like a part of it had been repurposed into a living space though. There were 2 straw pallets, a small table with a pair of chairs and a candle, and, most worryingly for me, a chain attached to the ground. Sirs, I decided to risk trying to convince them to let me go, and tried to put together a good case. My family is poor. We live well, but we have no savings. Ransoming me won't earn you much. They walked me over to the chains regardless, chuckling darkly as they attached the shackles to my wrists. I was able to walk a few feet before it grew taut, but I noticed that I wouldn't be able to reach either of the straw pallets. If I stayed, I would be sleeping on the dirty floor. At least I was able to reach the table, for all that is worth. My kidnapper pulled out a small vial with a wax seal and showed it to me. If we were ransoming you for money, that would be true, his voice incredibly smug. But all we need is for your parents to add this special seasoning to the food of their employers, house failures. Poison? I was surprised, and worried. If they are caught, they will be hanged. My entire family might be hung together. You had best pray that they don't get caught then. My kidnapper's statement was cold as ice, completely merciless. In fact, you had better pray that they agree to do it fast so we don't have to send parts of you to them to convince them. He held out the vial again, saying, all they need to do is get a single drop of this into their food, and everyone who tastes it will be dead. This poison is worth more than your life. With that, he and the other rogue left. For now, I was alone. The shackles were heavy on my 3-year-old body. I could barely lift my arms. There was nothing for me to do but sit down, pull my knees up to my chest, and wonder if I was going to die again. I didn't want to die, not so soon. I loved my family. Even if they weren't my first family, they didn't know that, and they certainly would love me anyway. They were good people, and a wonderful family, and I had finally recovered from my initial malaise enough to enjoy being with them. Was there anything I could do to escape? I'd need the key to my shackles, or a way to break them. The second part was simply impossible for me. An adult man with a physical class might be able to do it. Hell, Emil might be able to do it as a mere militiaman. But a classless 3-year-old girl? No, I would need the key. Could I steal the key from my captors? I knew absolutely nothing about pickpocketing or theft, and I could hardly lift my arms. Even if I could lift my arms enough, I would barely be able to reach their pockets with how short I was, and the shackles would make a lot of noise if I tried. The only thing I had was a small sewing kit in an inner pocket, that I had sewn on myself, of my dress. That, and the dress itself, which I couldn't even take off because it would just end up on the shackles. Not that I had a reason to take it off, but if one came up, I wouldn't be able to anyway. My captors came back with a bottle and some cups. It seems their part of the scheme was mostly done. They just needed my parents' agreement and they would give them the poison and everything would depend on what happened next. It seemed a bit early to drink, but I wasn't about to draw attention to myself by saying that. The entire day passed as I watched them talk and gamble. I learned nothing important from listening, except that they were consummate professionals despite being criminals. They never used their names, they never spoke about people they knew, and they never talked about their plans. I had hoped to learn something that would help me, but all I figured out was that another man would be joining us tomorrow. The one who had driven the carriage that brought me here. It was a summer night, but it was still cold. I curled up on the ground and tried not to cry or make noise. I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. I just couldn't, even though I knew I should. If a possibility to escape came, it would be all that much harder if I was sleep-deprived. Still, I was awake when the sun peeked through the gaps in the shutters on the windows. In a few hours, it would be a full day since I had been kidnapped. By now, my parents would know I was gone and the rogues have made their demands. All that was left was to return and see if they agreed. If they didn't, I'd lose a finger to convince them. If they did, chances were they would end up swinging from the gallows. I was feeling hopeless, and I was thinking that I should just resign myself to returning to the White Room, when another man entered, this one without a concealing cloak. He was short, pudgy, and dressed like a commoner with a trade, which is to say, he dressed well. Beady eyes, a pallid face with days-old stubble, and messy brown hair finished his image. Honestly, I thought he could have used one of those cloaks. "Only 2 cups?" he snorted. "Lucky I brought my own." "Fuck man, I almost put a dagger in you," one of the cloaked man groaned and sat up, stowing a blade that he had pulled from under his pillow when the fat man had come in. "You should know better than to wake us up like that, just like you should know better than to drink. You know you can't hold your goddamn liquor. And that matters why?" The man shrugged. "What's that little girl gonna do even if I get blackout drunk? Tickle me to death." "It is the principle of the thing," the rogue grumbled. And now all of my captors were in one room: the kidnapper, the rogue, and the fat driver. I still didn't know names, so all I could do was label them. The 3 ate breakfast, not bothering to feed me. Not that I asked, I just tried to stay as inconspicuous as possible. I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, but I was more afraid of them than I was hungry. And, of course, despite the immaturity that came with a young body, I did have an adult mind, and I knew that asking for food was just an invitation for abuse. "And you were already drinking the good bottle," Rogue groused as he finished eating. "Bring your own next time, I hate sharing with you." The kidnapper just sighed, and got up from the table. "I am going to meet the boss," he said as he moved towards the door. Despite everything, it was still hard for me to look at him. It was like my eyes just slid away from him. "You two think you can keep watch? I will probably end up doing most of it myself." Rogue spoke under his breath, and then more loudly said, "Yeah, I'll keep watch here, but I don't think the girl will give us any trouble." "You mean that the girl can't give you any trouble?" I thought to myself. "I'll leave the Nithaler extract with you too." Kidnapper gave the vial to fat driver. "I'll be back." With that, the kidnapper left. Not long after, Rogue turned to fat driver and said, "Look, we both know I hate you, and you don't like me. I'm going to keep watch outside. Do you think you can manage not to get blackout drunk?" Fat driver just poured himself a drink and made a rude gesture to Rogue, who shook his head in disgust and walked out the door. Over the next few hours, Fat driver did nothing but drink, and drink a lot. He went through one bottle and started another, with his face turning more red as noon approached. I watched him drink in silence until, "Ya watchin' me girl?" Fat driver's voice was slurred as he glared at me. "Ya find something into funna?" "No sir," I quickly shook my head and moved my eyes to the ground. "I was just thinking, it meant nothing." "So ya think me ugly? Huh?" Fat driver's voice got louder and his face redder as he got angry. "Nothing interestin' in lookin' at ol' Phil, huh? Figures a brat would use be like the bitch. Always lookin' down on me." "I would never." "Shut up!" Phil shouted, standing up, and I cringed back in fear. But my chain didn't let me run far. "Bitch like ya, need to teach ya a lesson. I MMA go take a piss, and then beat the piss outta ya." I watched him stumble away towards the corner of the warehouse, my heart beating out of my chest in sheer terror. I hoped he wouldn't kill me. They needed me alive after all, but that didn't mean they needed me healthy. And honestly, with the little I had seen of his Phil, I wasn't sure he would remember to leave me alive. The only good thing was that I wasn't old enough to be worth raping, or I am sure he would. I looked around desperately, looking for something, anything, that might help me. There was nothing. I had known that last night, as I had investigated every possibility and nothing had chance. Phil had left the vial on the table. I could just barely reach the table. Could I use something to bring the vial close enough for me to grab? No, there was nothing close enough. My only choice was to tip the table. The table was heavy, and my shackles were heavy, but the adrenaline pumping through my veins was enough. I tipped the table, spilling food and drink onto the floor with a small crash and clinks. From the floor, I grabbed the wax top vial. And now ya spill in my drink. Phil roared, his footsteps thumping furiously as he approached. Ya are gonna regret the girl. I had the vial, and my little sewing kit and a needle. I nearly fumbled and dropped the needle, but I managed to push it through the wax just as Phil reached me, looming above me and backhanding me across the face to send me sprawling onto the floor. It took all I had to keep my grip on the vial. I barely managed it, and as he approached again, I whipped the needle out and stabbed it into his leg. Yahoo! He roared again, grabbing my throat in both hands, pulling me off the ground as I tried to loosen his grip. I couldn't breathe. He was going to kill me. But then, Phil's eyes defocused, he dropped me and I scrambled away quickly. He looked confused for a second, then 2 seconds, before falling to his knees, and then face down on the floor, dead. I had killed him. I didn't have time to think of that now. In my head, a plan was forming. It was rough, but it was all I had. If it didn't work, I didn't even want to know what they would do to me for killing Phil. Instead of letting my mind think about the fact I had taken a life, I took the needle back and wiped it off on Phil's clothes and then put it back into the poison before moving as far away from the body as my chain would let me. What the fuck is going on here, Phil? I was just in time for Rogue to come in, throwing the door to the warehouse open and seeing the mess. He just started shouting at me. I didn't do anything, I swear. I start crying. He hit me and choked me and called me a whore and then just fell over. But I swear I was just sitting and being quiet. Please don't hurt me. Rogue looked at me, then looked at Phil's body, and just sighed in disgust, muttering under his breath that of course Phil had gotten blackout drunk and messed up the place. He walked up to Phil's body, and as soon as he got into range, I launched myself at him and stabbed him with the needle too. The fuck? Rogue yelped, then his eyes widened. Wait, the poison? A few seconds later, he was on the ground, dead. I desperately searched his body, hoping and praying that he had, and he did. He had the key to my shackles. My hands trembled and shook so much that it took 3 tries to put it into the lock, but I finally managed it. The shackles dropped to the ground and I ran for the door, stumbling out into the light and wildly looking around. I had no idea where I was, except that I was in the city still. This place was run down and I didn't see anyone around. But that didn't matter. There wasn't a part of Verdun that wasn't close to some busy area. I could hear the sounds of a crowd and I ran in that direction, running into an open market square and shouting at the top of my lungs. Help! Murder! I screamed, someone help! One of the things I was surprised to learn about medieval times was that there really wasn't anything like the police. There were guards, but they were almost exclusively at the city wall or at the entrance to the noble quarter. Instead, things relied on the hue and cry system, where when a crime was committed, citizens were expected to drop what they were doing and work together to stop the crime. It didn't always work, but there were 2 things that would always bring crowds running: murder and fire. People came over immediately, demanding I explain. They grabbed me and took me and now they're dead. I wailed, obviously not mentioning that I had killed them. I led a crowd of people to the warehouse and to the bodies, taking advantage of my apparent age to avoid explaining exactly what had happened other than that they had taken me from my family and that they had died. The guards were called and the questioning became a bit more professional, and more importantly, these were actual guardsmen with skills. One of them had a skill that allowed them to tell truth from lies, and he immediately realized I wasn't telling the truth. Little girl, he glared down at me, most of his face hiding behind an incredibly impressive mustache. This is very serious. You may be young and a girl, but I will take the rod to you if I have to. They said they would kill me or hurt my family if I caused trouble, I said quietly, still playing the kid card for all it was worth. In theory, I could just be honest about this whole thing, but the reality was that my parents probably had not reported the blackmail, which meant that they had technically been plotting to kill members of the nobility. It was best to try and get as much sympathy from as many people as possible. They were going to cut off my fingers and send them to my parents, I whispered, the shaking in my voice not entirely feigned. I didn't need to lie about my fear and terror after all. They were going to send them pieces of me until they agreed to put that stuff into the food of House Felius. I tried to frame it in such a way that it sounded like my parents hadn't been told yet, or may have even refused. That statement resulted in me eventually being brought into House Felius itself, and there I saw Mom, Dad. I shouted, tears in my eyes. No acting in this, just pure relief and joy. Honora. Oh, gods, my baby. Mother and I rushed towards each other, meeting in the middle of the hall we had been brought to and clutching each other, breaking down and sobbing as we hugged. My brother joined our group hug a second later, absolutely bawling and telling me that he was sorry again and again. I tried my best to reassure him, muffled as I was against Mother's chest. Father took a few steps forward, hesitated for a moment, and then turned and bowed deeply to a sharply dressed man that I hadn't noticed. My Lord Felius, please forgive my family for their outburst. They are overcome from emotion and mean no disrespect. Father said, and it was a true enough statement. Lord Felius just waved his hand and said, I did not find any insult in it. To expect a mother to do anything but put their children first is to expect the sun to rise from the north. I will give them some time to gather themselves before asking my questions. Thank you for your forgiveness and wisdom, my lord. Father bowed again, even deeper this time. We will not trespass on it. With that, Father joined the group hug, whispering words to calm us down. Despite our roiling emotions, we were not just before a noble, but the head of House Felius. A titled and landed baron. He didn't need a reason to do whatever he wanted with us. We weren't serfs, we were free people, but that difference rarely mattered when the nobles were the ones who enforced justice in the first place. I managed to calm myself and extricate myself from the group enough to curtsy to Lord Felius. Forgive me, my lord, and thank you for your mercy. Your parents are hard workers and good servants, girl, Lord Felius replied with a slight smile. And I understand that you are training to work with them when you awaken. I am more than happy to help them, and you might make a good personal maid for my daughter. I would be honored, my lord, I curtsied again, surprised by such a generous offer. Calvin and Mother managed to get themselves together by this time and greeted the lord. Afterwards, Lord Felius had me tell the story of what happened to me, and I did, leaving nothing out. You managed to kill these despicable kidnappers and assassins yourself? He was quite impressed by my accomplishment, and you are only 3 years old. Yes, my lord, I didn't want to kill anybody, but I don't think I had a choice. Lord Felius didn't care that they were dead. Well, he would have preferred them to be alive to question, but that was obviously impossible, and he was happy that those 2 men had died. You know, this entire thing is somewhat amusing. Lord Felius chuckled and sat back in an ornate chair that had been brought for him. It isn't exactly a secret that I have the skill poison immunity, so Nathaler extract does nothing to me at all. And my family are visiting their cousins in the capital for the season, so their plan was doomed from the start. In the end, we received a reward from the lord and returned home. A bounty had been placed on my kidnapper, who had escaped, and life moved on. Officially, the guards had broken in and freed me. My role in my own escape was downplayed. So hopefully the kidnapper wouldn't come back for revenge. Life moved on, a little more warily, but it still moved on. Told continued. Thanks for listening.